Hey guys, it's Brian from X's Motorworks and welcome back to my shop. So hey, before we even get really started, I need to point out the new person here, so Tristan. He is kind enough to be helping me out in his spare time. Thank you very much, Tristan, appreciate it. And so what he's doing right now, just so you're aware, is I'm starting to powder coat certain parts, and he's going ahead and taking off the back radiator so we can start powder coating the fan shroud itself. So anyway, but in the last video, and oh yes, as you can see, I'm getting out videos much quicker. In the last video, I was talking about the problems I had with the ECU and the different components. So let me kind of go through that real quick. So what I wasn't aware of was the fact that Audi and Mercedes and some of the German companies have switched and don't really use CAN bus anymore. They do for non-critical systems, but for critical systems, they use something called FlexRay. And that's tied into the engine, the transmission, and the ABS. I think it was in the airbag system too, but I'm not 100% sure. So I kind of didn't know about that when I kind of went ahead and purchased this stuff. And so I am familiar with CAN bus. I've done some CAN bus hacking / re-engineering, whatever you want to call it. So I felt comfortable being able to kind of manipulate the system and make it do what I wanted it to do if I was true CAN bus, but it wasn't CAN bus, and I found that out. I don't want to say relatively quickly, but it certainly found that out. The motor was a 2013. The rest of the cars, 2018, 2020. I've got some other aftermarket components and stuff like that from Audi. But the 2013 ECU was CAN bus only. The rest of the car now is, like I said, FlexRay. So what I did was I took that ECU, and I didn't really know about the FlexRay when I was doing all this. What I did was I wired that ECU up, and I hooked everything up and turned the system on, and the ECU basically didn't register with the gateway. So I knew I kind of had a problem, and I'm like going, okay, well, 2013, 2018, you know, that kind of makes some sense. So then I bought a 2018 ECU. Now that is a slightly different setup. They got rid of the supercharger and went to a turbocharger. But I felt that, okay, even though it's even though they've got the different components, I could probably make it work. Because I always knew I was going to put a 700 in the system, just because we're going to have active aero and a couple of other features. So I always knew that this was kind of a stepping stone, and I really just needed to kind of get the system running and kind of go from there. So I wired up another wiring job, but I wired up the 2018 ECU. Got all that working, and it registered. Gateway was happy. If you don't know about Audi, there's a aftermarket component, aftermarket software you can use called VCDS, which kind of goes through all the whole diagnostics. Because I don't have Otis, which is the stock Volkswagen Group diagnostic program. So anyway, I've got everything talking. I went into the transmission, and it actually said firmware not recognized. So the ECU and the TCU were talking to each other, but the TCU said, I don't understand what the ECU is saying. And then I started doing some research. So this combination, the DL382, which is a dual clutch transmission, was never mated to a supercharged V6, or any kind of V6 for that matter, as far as I could find out. Because this is actually front wheel drive only. That's a big caveat. If you had a Quattro where it's all wheel drive, then you could find it, but they didn't have such a thing. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I am totally going to get rid of the concept of being able to run the stock ECU and then show the 700 and show the power head gains. I kind of wanted to say, okay, look, you know, you got a stock system, 300 horsepower, change the pulley, get more, la-di-da-di-da-di-da. Go through the whole process. Again, we're trying to get about 500 wheel horsepower out of this thing. So scrapped that idea, and I went and wired up the 4-cylinder stock ECU, knowing that the firmware from that ECU and the TCU would be able to talk, and we could shift the car. As long as it didn't go into limp mode. I'm not sure with the limp mode if that's going to change the shifting pattern, but how do I get it out of limp mode, considering that we're not actually going to have the 4-cylinder ECU run the 6-cylinder motor? So what I've done is I've gone ahead and, like I said, wired up the 4-cylinder motor, so it's all wired, it's got power, that kind of stuff. It doesn't control any of the functionality of the motor itself. It just gets data. So it does know about the crank trigger, so does the fuel tech, so they both see the crank trigger. The stock ECU has a dummy throttle body on it, so it thinks it's controlling the motor. It's also got some other dummy components, but realistically, it's not doing anything. Actually, wait, it is controlling the fuel pressure temporarily, and I'm gonna, because this fuel system is slightly different. The pump is a 3-wire pump. I don't need to control it long term. I just want to see if it'll actually get it running. That could be a problem. It might not actually fire because even though it does have a direct injection, both these motors are direct injection, if the phasing of the reading of the cam phase is out of sync, then it probably won't fire. But we'll see. We'll check that out here. Actually, you know what? We're going to check that out in this video. I'll end this video with attempting to start this motor. So where we're at right now is the fuel tech is wired. So as I alluded to in the last video, I said we've got crank trigger, we've got cam sync. I'm not going to use the cam sync right off the bat. Crank trigger, we've got the coils wired into fuel tech, we've got the direct injectors. They're actually wired to the BMW controller because of the voltage needed to actually open a direct injector. And the 700 is actually controlling that setup though. And then what else do we have wired in? So I think we've got a couple of the sensors. We got obviously the throttle bodies wired in the fuel tech. Pretty much everything else is wired into the fuel tech. So the fuel tech should make this motor run. We don't know, but we'll see. If the only reason why it wouldn't be able to run is because of the fuel pressure is coming from, like I said, the stock ECU. The direct injection actually increases that fuel pressure, but the base fuel pressure is controlled by the stock ECU. So we'll see if it's actually happy enough to give it some fuel. But before I do that, I do need to do just a couple little things. One is, so I need to actually attach this. This is going to be, feeds the fuel tech, it gives the manifold pressure. Because why this tube, obviously I'm not going to use this tube long term, but I don't have the calibration for the sensor that came with it, so I need to go ahead. There's actually 2 sensors, one on each side, so I'm going to turn this one into a port, and once I get this here and I start the motor, I can actually develop a table based on the stock pressure, because I'll see what the manifold sees, and then I can write a complementary table that actually basically mimics whatever that is, and then I can get rid of that tube. The other thing, so I'm making a plate for that right now, so I can actually plug this in, test start it, and there's the sensor. So the other thing I need to do before I test start, what else? I guess that's all I really need to do before I test start. Obviously the cooling system, that's not in right now, but yeah, let's go ahead. So we're going to pause real quick, and I'm going to make this plate, and we'll get that put in, and then we'll probably double check a few things here before we start it. Make sure we got a fire extinguisher on hand. So hold on for a second, and we'll get everything situated. All right, yeah, you recognize that Yahoo Rashad. So he came in. Everything we've double checked everything. Got the vacuum line, like I said. Tristan, yeah, okay. Just a little bit scary moment. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. So we're actually going to take safety into consideration. We have a fire extinguisher over there.
It's kind of far away, but we'll still use it.
I got to hop on the other side of the car here, and we're going to push the button and see what happens. Okay, so first I got to turn the car on. So standard Audi on-off switch. Just push the button, and you'll hear everything. It's pissed off still. You might hear some beeping and. All right, the dash, I can see the stock dash. You can't really see from there, but okay. Here goes nothing.
Don't sound bad. Don't sound bad. That did not sound bad.
It's burning oil.
Yes, definitely burning oil.
All right, well.
That didn't sound bad though.
No, okay, so it's burning oil, or maybe it just needs to run a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think it just needs to run.
Not exactly sure, but nothing caught on fire, so there's a bonus. So I guess that's a good stopping point for this video. It doesn't work, so the project is alive. I think we're going to change the name too. I think we're going with Morpheus, which is going to have like a weird spelling, so it'll be Fiat and Audi together, so and morph together, you know. So we don't have nearly as many parts nowadays. We only have, I don't know, not 8 manufacturers anymore, maybe down to 5 or 4. We'll figure that out at the end. So anyway, hey, from me, Rashad,
Woohoo!
Tristan. Thanks for
Yeah.
watching, and we'll see you real soon.